I was 16 years old. I don't even remember what month it was, but I know for sure it was summer. My parents were away for the weekend, so I had the house to myself for 2 whole days. I spent most of that time doing whatever I wanted. Usually I was switching between YouTube, gaming, and making trips to the kitchen for snacks. Honestly, I spent about 99% of my time sitting in my room with my headphones on. As a teenager, it felt amazing. I could stay in my room and do whatever I wanted without anyone bothering me. At one point while I was gaming, I started hearing voices. At first, I thought a video had started playing on my phone by itself, but when I checked YouTube, everything was paused. I took off my headphones and realized the sound was coming from outside. My bedroom window was cracked open, slightly, and I could hear someone talking. The voice was muffled and it was raining outside, which made it even harder to understand, but whoever it was sounded very close, almost like they were standing right beside the outside wall of the house. I couldn't make out what they were saying or even if they were talking to someone else. I only heard one voice. When I got up from my chair and walked to the window to listen more carefully, the talking suddenly stopped. I decided to go downstairs and check through another window. Honestly, having someone walking around so close to the house at midnight felt strange to me, but whoever had been there was apparently gone because I couldn't see anyone when I looked outside. Since I was already downstairs, I grabbed a bag of chips from the kitchen and went back to my room. I probably played for another hour, but the time went by fast. I was in the middle of a game when I suddenly heard something outside my headphones. Even with them on, the sound was clearer than what I had heard before. It wasn't louder, just clearer. I was almost certain someone had called my name. I quickly pulled my headphones off and listened. The house was quiet except for the usual creaks and pops from the wood. Then about 15 seconds later, I heard it again. The man called my name, Carlos, my real name, but my friends always called me Luke, and that's exactly what the man said. I didn't recognize the voice. More importantly, I was almost certain it was coming from downstairs, from inside the house. I carefully set my headphones on the desk and walked toward my bedroom door. I opened it as slowly as possible so it wouldn't make any noise. The moment it cracked open, he called my name again, not yelling, just calmly saying it, like someone calling for you to ask a simple question. The calmness made it so much worse. His voice was rough and raspy, like a man in his 50s whose lungs had been ruined by cigarettes. When he called again, I knew for sure he was inside the house, probably standing near the bottom of the staircase. I slowly backed away, leaving my bedroom door open. I was afraid closing it would make noise, and he was already too close. I moved to the back window, opened it wider, and carefully climbed out onto the roof. Then I pulled the window nearly shut behind me without actually locking it. It wasn't a full roof. It was the small roof over the front porch, only about 3 or 4 feet wide. I could stand or sit on it, but it definitely wasn't safe, especially because it was wet from the rain. But I didn't really have another option. Either I stayed there or I hid in my room and waited for the police, hoping he wouldn't find me first. That's when I realized something terrible. My phone. I had left it on my desk. I was so scared that I hadn't even thought about it. I moved closer to the window, thinking about going back inside to grab it, but the moment I looked into my room, I saw the shadow of someone standing in the hallway outside. I immediately pulled back and hid. My heart felt like it was about to explode out of my chest. A few seconds later, I heard movement inside my room. Then he called my name again in that same calm, horrifying voice. I carefully peeked from farther away. All I could see was his shadow moving across the walls. It looked like he was staring at my desk. He had probably noticed the game still running and realized I had been there only moments ago. Part of me wanted to look again and see what he actually looked like, but I couldn't risk it. Every instinct in my body told me I would be seen, so I made a decision. I moved to the far edge of the roof. Below me was a small tree and a patch of grass. The drop was probably 8 to 10 feet. At first, I held on to the edge with both hands, then I let go. I hit the ground hard and fell, but thankfully nothing broke. I got back up and ran to the nearest house. Honestly, I wasn't. Now I understand why people in other stories always seem to find someone willing to open their door. I couldn't get anyone to let me in. Most of the neighbors thought I was just some crazy kid pounding on doors in the middle of the night. Eventually, though, things worked out because one of the houses called the police after hearing all the banging. When the officers arrived, I was finally able to explain what had happened. I don't know exactly how long I stayed outside, maybe 20 minutes before the police showed up. By then, the man was already gone. The officer found my bedroom window wide open. Apparently, after I escaped, the man had climbed onto the roof. My stomach dropped when I realized how close I had actually been to him. A few days later, my legs swelled up from the fall, but thankfully, I didn't suffer any serious injuries. The thought that my decision to jump off that roof may have saved my life or stopped whatever sick thing that man was planning to do is is terrifying all by itself. Even now, I still think about it. I came so close to seeing his face, but I never did. Sometimes I tell myself I wish I had looked, but it's easy to say that now. The man never came back, and nothing else ever happened after that. I'm older now, and I don't expect anything like that to happen again or ever come up for any reason. These days I work security at a small office building in town. Even after everything that happened, I decided to stick with this job because I couldn't find anything else that paid better. But honestly, the moment I get a better opportunity, I'll probably leave. The reason I accepted the job in the first place and why it never really bothered me much is because the building is part of a larger business district in a relatively wealthy area. To be honest, I never thought anyone would try to break into a place like that. Areas like this usually have security everywhere. If there aren't guards around, there are cameras and surveillance systems. Anyway, my shift started at 10 p.m. I did a quick walk around the building, activated all the security systems, and then went back to the security office. It was a small locked room with no windows, not exactly the most comfortable place to sit for hours. If I have a choice, I prefer walking around instead of sitting still. Officially, I was only required to do a patrol once every hour, but I usually walked around more often than that because sitting in front of the monitors all night was incredibly boring. That particular night, it was raining hard outside. Because of that, I spent most of my patrols walking through the inside of the building. There's something important I should mention. The outdoor security cameras always became nearly useless during heavy rain. Water would blur the lenses so badly that it was difficult to see anything clearly. About 30 minutes into my shift, I got an alert on one of the monitors. Movement had been detected near the front entrance. I looked at the screen, but I could barely make anything out. It seemed like someone was standing just outside the main door. I left the security office and went down to the ground floor. I only wanted to check if someone was really there and find out what they wanted. But when I opened the door and looked outside, nobody was there. I closed the door and reset the system. It was strange for anyone to be around that night. Maybe somebody had simply walked up to the wrong building. I went back to the security office and sat down. Only about 5 minutes passed before I heard a phone ringing. Not the security phone sitting on my desk. The sound was coming from downstairs, from one of the offices below me. Annoyed, I got up and headed downstairs. By the time I got there, the call had already ended. I waited for a moment because, for some reason, I felt like it was going to ring again. I followed the sound through a completely ordinary office area. Rows of desks sat side by side. All the lights were off. The only illumination came from the faint glow of a phone sitting on one of the desks. As I got closer, I could see the screen displayed odd unknown number. It struck me as incredibly strange. Why was a phone on that particular desk receiving calls in the middle of the night? Why wasn't the call going to the reception desk instead? And how would anyone even know the number of that internal office phone in the first place? Part of me wanted to answer it and ask who was calling, but it wasn't my job and I could have gotten in trouble for it, so I left it alone. The problem was that I couldn't silence it. The phone kept ringing on and off for almost an hour while I was upstairs. Eventually, around 1 in the morning, I got up and did another routine patrol around the building. About 10 minutes later, I returned. Just as I was about to sit down, I heard a loud bang somewhere inside the building. The sound was startling. It seemed to come from the stairwell. I checked the security system, but nothing appeared on the monitors. I hurried downstairs to make sure all the doors were secure. As I approached the front entrance, something immediately caught my attention. A green light was glowing on the security panel. The system had been switched into temporary bypass mode. I never used that setting. I either armed the system completely or turned it off. Nothing in between. Feeling uneasy, I disabled the bypass mode and opened the front door. The rain was still pouring outside. There was nobody there. I closed the door again. That night was becoming very strange. For the first time since I started working there, I felt genuinely unsafe. I immediately ran toward the stairwell to check the security systems again. When I reached the 3rd floor, I stopped cold. The hallway door was open. It was the same floor where I had found the ringing phone earlier. I slowly moved closer and looked inside. Suddenly, everything went dark. My vision and hearing disappeared for a split second, like I had blacked out. When I came to, I was dizzy and immediately knew what had happened. Someone had hit me in the back of the head. I stumbled backward down a few steps, barely able to stand. As I looked up, I saw the silhouette of someone standing near the doorway. Adrenaline took over. I jumped to my feet and ran down the stairs. My ears were ringing and my head was throbbing with pain. I rushed out of the building, called the police using my work phone, and hid behind my car in the pouring rain. I stayed there until they arrived. I honestly don't know how long I waited. When the police finally got there, they couldn't find anyone. They took me to the hospital instead. I had a pretty serious concussion, but thankfully, I recovered without any major complications. complications. What happened could easily sound like an ordinary break-in, but there were too many details that made it feel professional. Whoever it was chose a rainy night when the outdoor cameras were almost useless. The person making the phone call somehow knew the number of an internal office phone that wasn't available to the public. Most importantly, they knew exactly how to disable part of the security system. It's hard for me to believe that someone just wandered in by accident. The blow to my head was so hard that all I saw was a blurry shape. I couldn't give the police any meaningful description. Since then, I've accepted that I may never get answers. I've still been working there for months. The company never said anything. They never announced that anything had been stolen. They never figured out who it was. They never explained why someone broke in. Nothing. The whole thing was incredibly strange. I'm still looking for another job, and until I leave, I'll keep paying attention to anything unusual that happens in that building.